What would make a future king draw a permanent line through his own stepmother's royal future? Not in anger, not in public, but in cold, careful, official language that nobody inside the palace could reverse. That is exactly what Prince William reportedly did. And the moment Queen Camilla heard those words read aloud inside Clarence's house, she did not shout, she did not cry, she did not reach for a phone. By accounts from those familiar with the events that followed, she went completely silent. Because silence is what arrives when a blow is too precise for any response to cover. Tonight we are walking through every detail. What William reportedly announced, what triggered it weeks earlier inside a private royal gathering, what happened behind closed doors between father and son, and why this moment may be the single most consequential decision the future king has made before wearing the crown. Stay with us until the very end, because the final chapter of this story is the part the palace hoped nobody would piece together. Before we go 1 second further, if you are new to the Royal Pulse, this is exactly the kind of deep, serious royal storytelling we bring you every week. Hit subscribe right now and turn on notifications. You do not want to be the person who missed this one. Now let us get into it. William did not arrive at Kensington Palace that morning with uncertainty. According to sources familiar with the events of that day, he arrived with a sealed statement, a constitutional advisor at his side, and the bearing of a man who had already made peace with the cost of what he was about to do. Kensington Palace, one of the working royal residences used for official household business, had witnessed consequential royal announcements before. Births, deaths, engagements, separations. The building had absorbed decades of royal consequence. But this one, by all available accounts, was different in a way people inside the household felt immediately. Senior courtiers stood back. Legal advisors watched the sealed royal statement with the attention of people who understood its implications would not be easily reversed. Aides moved quietly, the way staff move when they already know what is coming and understand that comfort is not part of their role in that moment. William reportedly began speaking with complete control. He announced, according to accounts from individuals familiar with the gathering, that Camilla would no longer hold any future ceremonial authority during his reign. She would be excluded from succession-era planning, from transition councils, and from symbolic roles connected to his future kingship. A transition council, for those unfamiliar, is the private planning group responsible for preparing how power, duties, and public roles move from one reign to the next. It is not a ceremonial gathering. It is where the actual structure of a future monarchy gets quietly decided before the public ever sees it. That is why, by every account available, the room froze. William was not adjusting a schedule. He was not reassigning a public appearance. He was reportedly closing a door before Camilla could step through it, and doing so through the most official language available to him. According to those familiar with the atmosphere in the room, the weight of what was being said landed before the final sentence had finished. The prince understood exactly who would feel this first. His father's wife, the queen consort, a woman who had spent the better part of 2 decades navigating public hostility, earning institutional acceptance, and building a place inside a family that had not always made room for her willingly. And now the man who would one day inherit everything was telling her, in the most formal language at his disposal, that her place did not extend into his chapter. Camilla was inside Clarence's house when the announcement reached her. Clarence's house, the London residence she shares with King Charles, had always represented something removed from the worst of public judgment. The place where the formality of royal life gave way to something closer to private existence. That changed the moment an aide read the statement aloud. According to accounts from people familiar with her response, she turned to her private secretary and asked one question. Did he say I was unfit? That question stripped every official phrase down to its nerve. This was no longer about protocol or succession planning or ceremonial arrangements. This was about dignity, and she reportedly felt hers being systematically removed by a man she had watched grow up inside the same institution she had fought so hard to belong to. Charles, by accounts from those close to the situation, had been aware the announcement was coming. He had reviewed the internal palace assessment examining influence, access, and family decision-making, and he had not intervened. He had understood its implications and chosen silence. That silence became the first crack in the mystery of how this moment had been allowed to arrive. William was not simply deciding what kind of future he wanted to build. He was deciding what kind of monarchy he was willing to inherit. and he had concluded that carrying the old tensions forward alongside the crown was not something he was prepared to accept. Behind this announcement stood 3 lives locked in a triangle that the palace had no official language to describe. William, carrying the full weight of a future advancing faster than anyone had publicly acknowledged. Camilla, fighting not to be erased from an institution she had entered through the narrowest possible door. Charles, caught between loyalty to the woman beside him and the survival of the crown his son would inherit. This was not a dispute about ceremony. It was a family wound reopened under the coldest possible institutional spotlight. William had reportedly understood the danger before anyone around him dared say it aloud. Every symbolic role, every ceremonial seat, every procession placement, every name positioned near the future throne carried meaning. The monarchy does not survive only through law. It survives through signs, through the visible language of who stands where and what that positioning communicates to a watching public. The future king did not see Camilla's ceremonial role as a harmless inherited detail. He saw it as part of the architecture his reign would either dismantle now or carry forward at increasing cost. He had decided, by all available accounts, that addressing it now was less damaging than allowing it to follow him into the throne. Camilla experienced the decision through an entirely different frame. She had walked through years of public judgment, institutional suspicion, and the long shadow of a comparison the public had never fully released. She had arrived at a place of genuine, if not universal acceptance. She had performed her role as queen consort with a consistency that even her critics acknowledged. And now William's reported words made her feel as though the palace had accepted her only for the present, never for the future. Charles, according to people familiar with his state of mind during this period, sat alone after reading the statement. The king did not reach for a phone. He placed the paper down and looked ahead. Caught between the woman he loved and the son who would carry the crown, he found that the most powerful position in Britain offered him no clean path through this particular moment. If he defended Camilla openly, he risked weakening William before the next reign had formally begun. If he defended William, he wounded the woman beside him with his own voice. He found neither resolution. Catherine had reportedly seen the pain before the room ever heard the words. In the days before the briefing, she had watched William remove every softened phrase from the draft statement, leaving only cold institutional precision. The Princess of Wales understood that his closest advisors had warned the announcement would read as punishment. He had insisted it was protection. She had not argued. She had simply reminded him, by accounts from those close to the couple, that protection and punishment can arrive in identical envelopes. Every royal crisis has a moment that everyone later pretends they did not see coming. For William, that moment reportedly arrived during a private succession rehearsal at Windsor Castle, weeks before the announcement, in a room that was supposed to produce order and instead exposed something the palace had been quietly managing for years. Windsor Castle was not simply a backdrop for this gathering. It is a working symbol of royal history, continuity, and family authority, the kind of space where private decisions carry the weight of everything that has happened inside those walls before. The succession rehearsal had been arranged to settle private logistical details before the country ever saw them. Succession planning, in straightforward terms, means the careful preparation of royal roles, appearances, and responsibilities in advance of power passing from one monarch to the next. That day, the household was reportedly arranging seating order, ceremonial access, household roles, and the question of who would stand closest to the future king during the first major national occasions of his reign. According to accounts from individuals familiar with the gathering, Camilla raised a direct objection during the rehearsal. She reportedly challenged a ceremonial placement designated for Catherine and demanded a voice in William's future court arrangements, specifically objecting to the Princess of Wales being named first family representative in his future coronation household plan. A coronation household plan is the private structural arrangement of people and duties prepared for the ceremony that formally marks a new monarch's beginning. The words landed before anyone had time to prepare for them. Catherine sat composed, by accounts from those present, refusing to turn the moment into confrontation. The Princess of Wales had learned through years of navigating this family's particular pressures that composure can be stronger than any defense. But William reportedly saw what her restraint was costing her. Charles looked away. The king did not raise his voice, did not intervene for Camilla, did not intervene for Catherine. His silence moved through the room, and what it communicated was that the old pattern still held power, even in a room full of people planning the future. Camilla then reportedly asked for written assurance that she would retain ceremonial influence during William's reign. Written assurance meant an official commitment that could later be used to protect and enforce her position. According to sources familiar with the atmosphere, advisors shifted. The room understood the implications of what was being requested and what it would mean if it was refused. William reportedly made a decision in that moment, not announced, not dramatic, but visible to those watching him closely. He understood this was no longer about one seat at one ceremony. It was about whether his reign would begin already weighted by unresolved conflicts the previous generation had never fully addressed. Later that week, a senior courtier placed a confidential memo on his desk. The document was reportedly titled Future Role Boundaries. A confidential memo is a private palace record used to formally register sensitive decisions before they enter the official process. Once that memo reached Charles, the situation inside Windsor's walls could no longer stay there. The confrontation did not happen in public. It happened, according to accounts from individuals familiar with the meeting, in a small private drawing room. No cameras, minimal staff, no diplomatic buffer between the three people who needed to finally speak to each other directly. William stood near one side of the room. Camilla stood near the door. Charles stood between them, occupying the impossible position he had been occupying, in one form or another, for most of his adult life. No raised voices were reportedly necessary. The damage had entered the room before anyone opened their mouth. Every word spoken afterward only added weight to something already heavy enough to change the shape of the family going forward. William had requested the meeting after the memo reached his desk. Clarence's house, chosen for this conversation, was not neutral ground. It was the home Charles shared with Camilla, and every word spoken within its walls carried personal weight that no official language could neutralize. The memo had transformed a private family dispute into a formal institutional warning. A formal warning signals that a decision has moved beyond discussion and is advancing toward action. The prince had not come to debate feelings. He had come, by all accounts, to inform the queen consort that her future influence in his reign would be formally limited, and that this was no longer a matter open for negotiation. Camilla reportedly asked whether Catherine had requested this outcome. William answered without hesitation. The decision was his alone. He had reached it without prompting, and he would carry it without apology. Catherine's name still hung between them because Camilla understood the structural reality beneath the official language. If the Princess of Wales stood closer to the future throne, then the queen consort stood farther from it. That was the wound. Not the wording, not the procedure, the position. According to accounts from people familiar with the exchange, Charles did not defend Camilla when she turned toward him. She needed the king to place his voice between her and the institutional machinery his son was operating. He did not. And in that silence, according to those familiar with her response, she felt something she had not expected to feel inside her own home. The monarch loved his wife. Those around him had no doubt of that. But he also knew, by accounts from individuals close to the situation, that his son had secured support from transition advisors, the private experts who help plan how royal power and responsibilities pass into a new reign. Their involvement meant this meeting was not a negotiation. It was a formal warning delivered in person before the written notice arrived. Camilla reportedly asked directly whether she would still stand beside the family during future national ceremonies. William did not promise her that she would. Charles finally spoke. His voice, according to those familiar with the exchange, carried the weight of a man who had been holding something difficult for a long time. He asked his son one question: "Are you prepared for what this will cost us?" And once that question entered the room, the confrontation moved beyond emotion and into the permanent record of what this family had chosen. If you are still watching at this point, drop a comment with the words "I am still here." Let us see who is truly following this story all the way through, because what comes next is the part that changes everything you thought you understood about this announcement. Royal power does not always arrive as thunder. Sometimes it arrives as a slim folder placed quietly on polished wood, and the words inside it are more permanent than anything spoken aloud in any private room. After the confrontation, William's decision moved through the formal channels the monarchy uses for sensitive transitions. Constitutional advisors reviewed the language. Protocol considerations were addressed. The careful, methodical process of future authority being formally recorded moved forward. William worked through the draft line by line with his senior constitutional advisor, according to accounts from those familiar with the process. A constitutional advisor is the person responsible for ensuring royal decisions align with law, institutional duty, and the long-standing rules that govern how the crown operates. He removed softened phrases and replaced them with firm institutional language. He did not pause over the lines. He understood that every word would travel with the force of official record, and he had decided that precision served everyone better than ambiguity, even when precision hurt. One senior palace advisor reportedly warned that the move would appear to the public as William choosing Catherine's future position over Camilla's dignity. William heard the warning. He understood the risk. He did not remove the line. Camilla's present status remained formally untouched. She would continue to be treated with the respect due a queen consort beside Charles. But her place in the ceremonial structure of the reign that would follow had been defined without her at its center. Accession, the moment a new monarch formally takes the throne, had not yet occurred. But its architecture was already being drawn, and Camilla's name was not in the blueprint for what came after. Catherine entered briefly as the final draft was being reviewed, according to accounts from those close to the couple. She saw the exhaustion on William's face and understood it immediately. The Princess of Wales did not ask him to stop. She said one thing quietly. Strength without cruelty still carries pain. He looked down at the page. He already knew. Charles gave no written objection to the process. In the institutional language of the palace, the absence of a written objection from the monarch functions as permission, not the comfort of spoken support, but the formal absence of opposition that allows a process to continue. A written objection would have been an official act capable of halting or delaying everything. Charles produced none. That absence became the quiet seal on a decision his son had already made. There are moments when a palace does not need raised voices to feel shaken. The new reality arrived at Clarence House in a slim formal envelope, hand-delivered before lunch. Its language was precise. Its implications were total. Camilla read it once, then again, as though the words might shift if she gave them enough time. They did not. The notice confirmed that she would no longer participate in future transition councils or symbolic reign planning events connected to William's monarchy. She would retain her present title. Her current role beside Charles remained formally unchanged. But the future, the chapter that would follow Charles, had been drawn without her standing inside it. According to accounts from those familiar with her response, she sat alone after her aide left the room. She declined tea. She absorbed the particular weight of official language, which carries a cruelty that personal words never quite manage, because it removes the possibility of misunderstanding. There is nothing to interpret. There is nothing to soften in retrospect. A formal notice makes a decision real and places it beyond the reach of private conversation. Camilla had survived public judgment before. She had stood on public platforms while significant portions of the watching world decided she did not deserve to be there. She had absorbed years of comparison and come through it with her composure intact. This felt different. This had not come from newspapers or from public opinion. It had come from inside the family. It had come from William, and it told her something that no amount of public acceptance could counter, that the respect she had earned in the present did not carry into the future his generation was building. Charles entered later and found her waiting, according to accounts from those familiar with the exchange. Camilla looked at him directly and asked the question that had been forming since the envelope arrived. Had he stayed silent because he agreed with William, or because he had decided his son's authority mattered more than her dignity? Charles did not deny, by accounts from those close to the situation, that he had been aware of the draft before its release. He did not claim surprise. He did not offer the defense she needed. His silence gave her the answer before his voice did. For all the shock moving through the palace, the most important conversation in this entire sequence happened in near silence between two men who had never found it easy to say the difficult things directly. William came to see Charles not as an heir seeking permission. He came as a son carrying a decision that had already been made, and that had wounded the family in ways both of them could feel, but neither could fully name. According to accounts from individuals familiar with the meeting, the king did not greet him with anger. The two men sat across from each other at Buckingham Palace with no aides present and no official language available to translate what they actually needed to say. Buckingham Palace was significant not merely as a location, but as a symbol, the operational center of the monarchy, the place where private pain has always been asked to become public duty. Charles told William, by accounts from those familiar with the exchange, that Camilla felt publicly diminished. He did not say it as an accusation. He said it with the heaviness of a husband who could see the damage clearly and had no way to repair it. William listened. Then he answered, Catherine and the next reign could not begin under competing authority. The next reign, the period when he would formally hold the crown, would send signals from its very first moments about what the monarchy intended to be and who stood at its center. He had decided those signals could not afford ambiguity. William then reportedly admitted something that had not been part of any official statement or constitutional review. He told his father that every difficult decision involving Camilla pulled him back into old family pain, the kind the palace had buried across decades but never genuinely healed. He was not acting from anger. He was acting from a determination that unresolved history would not govern a new reign before it had the chance to establish itself on different ground. He did not call it revenge. He called it protection. Charles, according to accounts from individuals familiar with the conversation, revealed that he had remained silent throughout the process because he believed his son was not operating from malice. The king understood, even if he could not say so directly to Camilla, that William feared inherited tensions would damage the crown if carried unchallenged into the next chapter. Charles set aside the public reaction briefing that had been prepared for him, the summary of how the palace anticipated the public and media would respond, and looked at his son directly. He said the only thing left to say, then make sure your reign is worth the pain this cost. William did not answer quickly. The cost had finally been named by the one person whose naming of it carried the most weight. By the following morning, the palace no longer owned the story. Britain woke to a royal announcement that felt less like institutional administration and more like a verdict, one the family had tried to control through careful official language and had discovered, as royal families always eventually discover, that language only travels so far before the public takes it somewhere the palace never intended. Camilla reportedly saw the front page before anyone at Clarence House could reach it first. The paper carried a split image, William on one side, the Queen Consort on the other, beneath a headline that read, William draws the line. She looked at those words and understood the particular weight of being reduced to a headline. A front page matters in Britain not merely as journalism, but as a national symbol, the image a country collectively agrees to carry through the day as shorthand for something that has fundamentally shifted. William watched coverage on a muted television, by accounts from those familiar with his response. Broadcasters were framing his decision as his first major assertion of future royal authority, the clearest signal, yet that the next reign had already begun making itself felt inside the present one. Catherine remained close, but did not celebrate. She understood that public support can still feel cruel when it arrives entirely at someone else's expense. The palace released prepared language about continuity and respect. Continuity, the public reassurance that the monarchy remains stable even when the family behind it is navigating genuine internal fracture, was the institutional word the communications team reached for. People read beneath it. They saw a son defining his future without waiting for his father's generation to hand it to him. They saw a wife pushed away from a chapter she had expected to share. Outside Buckingham Palace, a small crowd gathered as it always does when something significant has shifted. One woman reportedly held a handwritten sign that read, "The future has spoken." That image, unofficial, unplanned, produced by someone who had simply walked to the gates with a piece of card, captured something the palace's entire communications apparatus had spent days trying to manage. A prominent broadcaster said in a recorded morning segment that this was the moment the next reign stepped out of the present king's shadow. William heard that line later in the day and went still, according to accounts from those close to him. Camilla heard it too. It landed differently for her. The final meaning of any royal announcement is never decided by the newspapers that carry it, the crowds that gather to process it, or the television voices that frame it for a watching public. It is decided by what each person inside the story accepts when the noise has faded and the family is left with what has actually changed. William's announcement was not remembered only because it shocked the nation. It was remembered because it revealed, with unusual clarity for a monarchy that typically prefers managed ambiguity, the shape of what was coming next. Camilla remained part of the present. She continued to stand beside Charles at official engagements, carry the title she had been given, and perform the public duties her role required. None of that had been touched, but she no longer stood inside the future William was building. Charles had chosen silence over intervention. Catherine had chosen restraint over triumph. William had chosen the burden of command over the comfort of delay. The verdict was uncomfortable in its precision. Camilla retained her present dignity, the queen consort beside the reigning king, but her future ceremonial standing in William's reign had been formally addressed before that reign had even begun. Ceremonial authority is not merely about standing at events in a visible position. It means having a recognized role in the public language of power, being part of the living architecture through which the monarchy communicates its values, its continuity, and its identity to the country it serves. That, according to every available account, had been removed. The monarchy absorbed the announcement by calling it necessary transition planning. The palace wanted the country to understand it as institutional preparation rather than personal punishment. Everyone inside the family understood the emotional cost the language was trying to contain. Camilla later attended a private family gathering and entered the room with composure, according to accounts from those familiar with the occasion. She greeted Charles quietly. She took her seat. She did not reach for the central position that had once appeared to be her natural destination. The king watched her restraint, by accounts from those present, with visible pain. He understood what it cost. He had helped make it necessary through the silence he had chosen. William stood across the room, no longer only the heir absorbing the present while he waited for the future to arrive. He had become the man already shaping that future. Charles saw the change clearly. His son had crossed from patience into command, and there was no returning to the arrangement that had existed before. Catherine remained steady throughout everything that followed. The Princess of Wales did not allow William's decision to become her victory. She did not carry Camilla's loss as a trophy. Her quiet, consistent, undramatic presence became the symbol of the chapter beginning, because she offered stability in exactly the place where the family had known tension for too long. William's truth, stated simply, was this: he had not excluded Camilla from the future to humiliate her. He had done it because he believed old wounds, carried forward unchallenged into a new reign, would eventually cost the monarchy more than the pain of addressing them honestly before accession arrived. He chose pain, now over confusion later. The future king stopped waiting for the monarchy to become stable. He began making it stable himself. And with that decision, made in private, announced in official language, and felt throughout an institution that had been managing this particular tension for 20 years, the crown stopped looking backward for permission and began moving forward under William's hand. And that is where tonight's story ends. If this video gave you something real to think about, please take a moment right now to hit the like button. Subscribe if you have not already, and turn on the notification bell, because the next story we are bringing you goes even deeper into what is quietly shifting inside the palace right now. Drop a comment below and tell us where in the world you are watching from and what time is it right now. And give us your honest take. Do you think William made the right call for the future of the monarchy, or did this go too far? We read every single comment. We will see you in the next one.